Hi everyone, I'm Gemma from Yes Matters. So today we're going to be talking about gender. So what is gender? Well, look, sometimes people use the word gender and the word sex as though it means the same thing, when actually it doesn't. Sex means you're male or female, and gender means masculine or feminine. And essentially what gender is sort of a set of stereotypes for males and females. It's pretty much the foundation of what sexism is built on. So examples of gender would be like pink and blue stuff for boys and girls. It would be calling a baby a pretty little girl or a big strong boy. So gender stereotypes, they're really damaging and really limiting to people. So let's look at gender for boys. So for boys, typically it's the colour blue. Typically it's calling them strong, and we hear phrases like man up a lot for boys. So it does some damaging things. For example, the only emotion that boys are allowed to show really is anger. If they cry, they get told they're crying like a girl. If they talk about their feelings or emotions and things like that, it's seen as not very manly. And this causes two big problems. The first problem is that it's really damaging to boys, and we see a lot of high suicide rate in young men because it's not manly to go and ask for help. It's not manly to cry. It's not manly to talk. So because of this male gender stereotype, a lot of the time men and boys won't go to the GP, the hospital or whatever. They won't ask for help, and they won't do that because it's seen as not manly. You're supposed to man up, suck it up, grow a pair, all this stuff. And it's interesting, some of the things that men are told when they're being shamed for showing emotions are also sexist. For example, they'll say things like stop being a pussy or stop crying like a girl. And that implies that to be female is to be lesser than. Gender stereotypes are inherently sexist. We also see that in homophobia as well. The idea that a man who's gay is also feminine and therefore lesser than. The other issue with teaching boys that the only emotion they're allowed to show is anger is when we get into relationships and things like that, there can be some problems. So other stereotypes that we see for boys are when you think about all the superheroes, all the representations of men on TV, from James Bond to Marvel heroes, things like that, they're always big muscles, they're always strong, they're always dominant, and they're always in control. So when we see these things represented in films and things like that, dominant and in control, it might go along with the movie plot. But when you think about relationships, dominant and control, that doesn't make for a very nice relationship. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone who believes that it's part of being a man to be dominant and controlling. So that's the other problem with these gender stereotypes is, unfortunately, men are over 90% likely of the perpetrators in domestic abuse. So whether they're in relationships with other men or with women, and this happens with children as well, because of these gender stereotypes, men are mostly the perpetrators of domestic abuse. And again, it's this link between feeling as though they need to be dominant and in control. And if they're not dominant and in control, the only emotion they're allowed to show is anger. And again, all these movies say that violence and reacting in violence isn't a bad thing. All these superheroes that you see, or any of the movies that you see, when the main character is a man, when he's sorting something out, an injustice, it's usually with violence. And we see this from guns for little boys, all the way up to these movies, and all the way up to pornography as well. And in pornography, men are usually being violent to the women. They're doing something to her rather than with her. So this stereotype is reinforced in loads and loads of ways and is really problematic. There's also a pressure that boys and men seem to have, something called the breadwinner, the idea of being the breadwinner. And a lot of people think, again, with a lot of gender stereotypes, they seem to think that this is a natural thing, when actually it's not a natural thing. Quite a while ago, before I was born, before anyone says it, there was something called the Children Act. Now, before the Children Act in the UK, men, women and children all went to work and they all got the same wages. When the Children Act came out, that said that all children had to go and have an education and go to school. And that meant that, families then lost wages. So basically what happened was when the children went to school because they had to, the wages from the child then went to the man. And because the women then, they had to go home and stuff like that when the child came home from school. So there was a restructuring of wages. Around the same time, all children used to all wear white dresses around the same time. And essentially a manufacturer thought, well, if there's a colour for boys and a colour for girls, I can make twice as much money. The thing you need to remember about gender stereotypes is that they are all socially constructed, all of them. None of them are natural. They are all socially constructed by society. They're all very profitable, but they're quite limiting and damaging. So now we come to gender for girls. So the main thing we have in gender stereotypes for girls, we have two. One that we're seeing a lot of at the moment is the idea that women and girls are caring. And so we see things called women's work, and that is housework, looking after the relatives if they become sick. So it's like over 80% of carers, people who stay at home and look after people who are ill or disabled, are women. Childcare as well, and that work tends to be unpaid. So at the moment when we have this virus, childcare and looking after people who are sick is really, really vital work, really important work, and the country can't function without it. And yet for centuries really, the stuff that women have been doing like this has been dismissed as unskilled and not important, when actually, as we can see at the moment, it is really vital and important. So there's this expectation that women are caring and that's just naturally a woman's thing, when actually, that's down to personality. We can be caring or not caring. We can like kids and not like kids. We can care about our parents or family members if they're ill or not. That's down to the personality of the individual. And it does also mean that because it's sort of seen as women's work and that women are supposed to do it, that means that, so for example, if someone you love got this virus, or if they were disabled and they need help, they would stay at home and look after them. But then that also means that they're doing a full-time job caring, so they can't go out and do a full-time job as well. So that leads them onto the benefit system, which is not a lot of money. It's below minimum wage, and that means that they have to stay in poverty. So, it's not very equal, and it's not very fair. This expected work that women are expected to do for free, but we're also supposed to carry on doing things in the workplace as though we don't have all this extra expected work. Another gender stereotype is something called sexual objectification, and that is the idea that what matters about women and girls is how they look, not what they do, not what they say, not what they think, not what they feel. As humans do all those things, it's just how they look. We see this in all media. So when we had a female prime minister, the majority of headlines were about how she looked, not about what her policies were, not about what she was saying on matters of state or national security that she was dealing with. It was about her kitten heels or what suit she was wearing or her weight and things like that. We see that a lot if you look in any newspaper, any magazine. It does tend to be about how women look and not about what they're doing. We see this in lots of things. So, for example, in the music business, we have Ed Sheeran, who's an incredibly talented musician, an amazing songwriter and singer. He comes onto stage in jeans and a top, pretty comfy. He's washed his face, he might have brushed his hair, he might not. He's there to sing, that's what his talent is. If you compare that to what Ariana Grande has to do, or what Beyonce has to do, or what Kesha has to do, or anyone else, all the females have to do, to go on stage, they usually have really sexualised outfits, sexualised dancing, they have to have been on diets, they have to look sexy, they have to be hairless, they have to have false eyelashes, they have to have false this, false that, this makeup, this, that. And essentially they're doing the same job. They're both stood on the stage singing because they're talented singers, and yet the expectation is really very different. We see the same when it comes to in the movies. It's usually, if there's a couple in a film, it's usually a guy who might be in his 40s, but his wife's in her early 20s, and the expectation of how they look and what they do is also very different. When a lot of the superhero movies came out, the difference in the questions they were asked was actually pointed out by some of the cast members. So Scarlett Johansson, who played the Black Widow, constantly got asked all day by all different journalists whether she wore underwear, and her male cast members were just sort of like, why do you keep asking her that? You've not asked any of us that question. So we basically we see it's reinforced in all the media that we have. And there's a problem with sexual objectification, because the idea of being a sexual object is that you're an object and not a subject. So if you think about objects are replaceable. If we break them, we can throw them away, they're disposable. But unfortunately, that attitude of women and girls being decorative sexual objects, we also see that reflected in crime. Because objectification is the first step in any violent crime. So if you believe that someone is a sexual object to be used and perhaps thrown away, we then see that reflected in sexual crime statistics towards women and girls, and also murder of women and girls is currently at a historical high. So if you believe that that's what someone is for, you're less likely to be concerned about doing it to them, especially if society reinforces the idea that that's what they're for. So if you sat on a chair and you broke it, you wouldn't say sorry to the chair. You would just get a new one. And unfortunately, that the gender stereotype of women being sexual objects, that reinforces into other things as well. And again, in pornography, women are something to be used rather than two people having a sexual experience that they mutually enjoy. It's something that she is the object to be used by the subject, the man being the subject and the woman being the object. And so gender stereotypes are very limiting and damaging, and other than profit, they don't really bring anything good to the table. We see the profit side of things as in, as we talked about the Victorian clothes, you can make twice as much as anything. So you can have pink razors and blue razors, you'll sell twice as many razors as if you just had the grey ones. And we see this in loads of adverts. I've seen an advert recently for men's skincare, and it's about taking back the power and having strong skin. Whereas the same company who will use exactly the same product but in a pink bottle talks about having soft, luxurious skin so that then it's nice to look at and it's nice to be felt. The messages we see are absolutely everywhere. So what can we do about gender stereotypes? Well, we can be aware of them, and we need to remember that boys and men, if they cry, they're not less manly. If they talk about their feelings and they have lots of emotions and they need help, it doesn't make them any less of a man, it just makes them a human. All humans have emotions, and if we can do that, then and get rid of the idea that they have this pressure to be dominant and in control and have no emotions, then we'll see those positive messages reflected in relationships. Everyone will be happier, healthier and safer. We need to be teaching boys and girls that they can be doctors, they can be nurses, they can like pink, they can like blue, they can climb trees and jump in the dirt, they can like be in a ballerina, they can do whatever they want, and it doesn't make them less of a man, less of a woman, less of a boy, less of a girl. It doesn't change any of that. Nothing falls off if you like pink and glitter. You know, it's about being yourself, the sex that you are, and gender stereotypes shouldn't control anything about you. If you don't like pink or blue or princesses or cars, that doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, if you embrace all of the things that life has to offer all humans, you will probably be happier and healthier. So, for your homework this week, I want you to look around at the media in films or online newspapers, magazines, anything like that, and have a look at how boys and women are represented, boys and girls, and men and women are represented in the headlines on what they're doing, what they're saying, or how they're looking. I'd love to know and hear your comments and examples below. And as always, at the end of every video, I want to ask if you have any questions that you want me to anonymously answer. I'll be doing a questions and answer video every couple of weeks, so any questions about absolutely anything to do with relationships, mental health, anything at all that you want to ask, just put it in the comment section and I will anonymously reply to you. I won't say, you know, Bob asked, why is this growing here? Anything you want. So yeah, I will see you tomorrow. Bye guys.